Hello, my name is Bridget Manley. I'm an Ascendant designer with Ascendant Design and Training, and I thought I'd just make a quick video to show you some cool things I just figured out how to do with variables in Storyline 360. I'm pretty new to Storyline, so I've just been kind of playing around with it and trying to figure out how it works. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into this today and show you what I did. So what I have here is a branching scenario that has a main slide here, and then 3 sub-slides that branch based on what choice you make here. So the premise of this is, you've just taken a module about this principle in high reliability organizing called commitment to resilience. Basically means when the unexpected happens, an organization isn't completely flattened by it, but it can kind of bounce back. So this particular slide is testing your ability to apply those principles. So the premise here is that the CFO here is coming to you and asking you how you can cut costs in your training department, and you have to choose one of these options here. Once you make your choice, the next slide is this one where it says, okay, a year after you make that choice, there's a giant storm that comes through your city, your office building is really damaged, and people have to work from home for 8 months, because, we all know about that, right? And then from there, it'll go to one of these 3 slides corresponding to the option you made in the main slide, showing you the outcome of your choice based on that scenario. So this was a little tricky in the fact that I wanted learners to branch to one of these 3 slides based on the choice they'd made in the main slide. But because I had this intermediary slide describing the scenario, I couldn't just set up a trigger that said go to either 3, 4, or 5 based on the selection, because of course the button is on this slide. So what I did instead is I set up a variable. I set up a variable called branching. It's a number variable, and the default value is 0. And then from there, I went into this slide, and I associated a trigger with each of these buttons. So anytime they clicked one of these 3 buttons, it would adjust the value of that variable. Here, if you click cross-training, it sets the value to 1. If you do virtual training, it sets the value to 2. And if you do upskilling, it sets the value to 3. So it just assigns, just a number to each one of those. In the next slide, in this one, I also set up triggers for the next button on this slide. It'll go to the outcome for eliminating cross training if the value of that variable is 1. And of course, the variable value was set at 1 if you hit the cross training button. And I just repeated that, and just set it up for each one of those buttons. So now, after you leave this slide, you'll go to one of these 3 slides depending on your choice, which is pretty cool. But once I figured that out and played it a few times, I realized that every time you made a different choice, you'd have to watch this slide over. So you might be watching it as many as 3 times, and I didn't want to do that. So what I did was I set up another variable in here called intro visited. And this is just a true or false. True being yes, you have visited the slide, false being no, you haven't. And the default is no, we're going to assume you haven't seen that slide yet. When you get to that slide, there's a trigger on here somewhere, maybe. Yes. Set the intro visited variable to true or yes when the timeline ends on this slide. So once you've seen the whole slide, it's going to say, okay, you've watched it, the value is true. Once I had that set up, I had to go back to this slide and figure out, okay, how do I get it to where they can skip that slide after they've seen it once? So what I did 2 things. One, I went into the original trigger I had made for these buttons, jumped to slide 1.2, what happens next, that's the intro slide in the variable, when they click this button, and then I just added this condition, if intro visited is false. So if they haven't seen that slide yet, this variable will say they haven't seen it, and so when you click this button, it'll take you to that slide and you get to see the scenario. But I also added another trigger to each of these buttons to say, jump to the corresponding slide, in this case, eliminate cross-training, when they click this button, if the intro visited condition is true. So if they have seen that slide, then if you click here, it's going to immediately take you to the corresponding slide. So that was kind of nice. That way you don't have to watch the same slide over and over again. That's just not good design, right? So that was a really easy way to get around that. Okay, so now I have the actual preview of this interaction up on Review 360. I'll just kind of show you how it works. I don't have any audio enabled. You don't really need it anyway. We'll just kind of scrub through it quickly. But you go through this, you get to see the CFO, he's asking questions, he's thinking, and then you have the 3 buttons that become active once the audio is finished. There's also a light box built into here to review the key practices here in case you get stuck and you need a little help. So that's what this is. So let's say the learner starts by saying, I'm going to try, reducing upskilling, see what that does. So then it'll take him to the introduction of the scenario. And once the timeline's done there, I'll hit next. And then it takes me to the outcome slide for reducing upskilling. As you might imagine, that's not a good idea. So learners get a chance to go back and make another choice. So let's say they want to say, okay, I'll try eliminating cross-training instead. Now it skips that introduction of the scenario slide because you've already seen it. Instead, it takes you straight to the slide about what happens when you eliminate cross-training, which, surprise, surprise, not a good idea either. So there's a go back button. You finally get to try the last one. And again, it skips that intro slide so you can see the outcome of that particular choice. And as you can imagine, that is the right choice. So that's just a simple example of how you can use variables to create some custom navigation through a branching scenario. I'm interested to keep practicing this because I think there's a lot of potential for making some really complex and sophisticated branching scenarios using these kinds of variables. But this is kind of a good entry-level practice for that. So that being said, I'm still trying to figure this out. So if you watch this and you say, okay, great, but there's an easier way to do that, please put that down in the comments. I'm all ears. If you like this and it was helpful, please let me know. If you'd like to see other things done in Storyline, let me know. I'm always up for trying new stuff. And until then, we'll see you later.